A racist white banker refuses to give a loan to a black man, even though the black man has all the necessary requirements for the loan. The racist banker is hit with karma the next time he sees the black man. Jay Harrison took a deep breath as he stood outside the bank. The tall glass building loomed over him, its mirrored windows reflecting the city around it. He adjusted his tie, straightened his shoulders, and walked through the large revolving door. Inside, the bank was just as imposing. Sleek floors, tall ceilings, and the faint scent of polish in the air. Jay made his way to the reception desk, where a well-dressed woman greeted him with a practiced smile. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you today?" "Morning," Jay replied. "I have a meeting with Thomas Parker. I'm here to discuss a business loan." The receptionist nodded, checking her computer. "Mr. Harrison, right? Mr. Parker's office is on the third floor. Take the elevator to your right, and his assistant will show you in." Jay thanked her and walked to the elevator. As he rode up to the third floor, he rehearsed what he would say, going over his business plan in his head one more time. He felt confident. His coffee shop was doing well, his financials were solid, and he had the community's support. He'd prepared for this moment. The elevator doors opened, and Jay stepped into a hallway lined with offices. A woman behind a small desk looked up and smiled. "Mr. Harrison?" she asked. Jay nodded, and she stood. "Right this way. Mr. Parker's expecting you." Jay followed her to a corner office. She knocked lightly, then opened the door. "Mr. Harrison is here," she announced. Thomas Parker looked up from his desk, a tight smile on his face. He was a middle-aged man, wearing a dark suit that looked as polished as the bank's floors. His eyes flicked over Jay, sizing him up. "Mr. Harrison, please come in. Take a seat," Thomas said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. Jay sat down, placing his briefcase on his lap. He took out his business plan and financial documents, setting them on the desk between him and Thomas. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Parker," Jay began. "I'm excited to discuss my plans for expanding my coffee shop. I've been part of the community for years, and I believe this expansion will bring more opportunities, not just for my business, but for the people in the neighborhood." Thomas picked up the documents and started flipping through them. His face was unreadable. "You've been running this coffee shop for how long now?" Thomas asked without looking up. 7 years, Jay replied. "We've built a strong customer base. The shop has become a central place for people in the community to gather, and I've hosted various events that have been very successful. The expansion will allow us to offer even more services." Thomas nodded, still looking at the papers. "And you believe this expansion will increase your revenue enough to justify the loan?" Jay leaned forward, his voice steady. "Yes, absolutely. I've done a detailed analysis. With the additional space, we can increase seating capacity, host larger events, and even partner with local artists and musicians. The demand is there, and this community supports its own. The numbers are strong, and I'm confident in our growth." Thomas set the papers down, leaning back in his chair. His smile was gone. "I see. But Mr. Harrison, we have to consider all factors when approving a loan. It's not just about numbers on a page. There's the question of reliability, long-term stability, and risk management. These are not things we take lightly." Jay felt a flicker of annoyance but kept his tone calm. "I understand that, Mr. Parker. But if you look at my credit history and the shop's financial records, you'll see that I've been consistent and reliable. There hasn't been a single late payment or financial issue. I've built a successful business from the ground up, and I've always paid my dues." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Yes, your credit is fine, but these days that's not always enough. We need to consider all aspects, including the demographics of the area and the type of clientele your business attracts. Sometimes those factors present risks that aren't immediately obvious on paper." Jay's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Mr. Parker, what do you mean by type of clientele? My customers are hardworking people from the community. They're loyal and supportive. The only risk I see is not meeting the demand for what my shop offers." Thomas leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Mr. Harrison, I'm simply saying that we have to be prudent in our decisions. Not every business is suitable for every type of loan. We have policies to consider." Jay felt his frustration rising. He had anticipated questions about numbers and projections, not this vague language about type of clientele and demographics. He kept his voice even, but there was an edge to it now. "I came here with a solid business plan and a proven track record. If there are concerns, I'd like to address them directly." "What exactly are you saying, Mr. Parker?" Thomas looked at Jay for a moment, then sighed, as if he was dealing with a child who didn't understand simple logic. "I'm saying that your business, while commendable, may not fit into the type of portfolio we're looking to expand at this time. It's nothing personal. It's about managing risk and maintaining the integrity of our financial products. Jay felt a chill run through him. He recognized what was happening. It wasn't about numbers or risk. It was about him. It was about his skin color and the people he served. He forced himself to remain calm, but his voice was firm. Are you denying my loan application because of the community I come from? Thomas's eyes flickered with irritation. Now, Mr. Harrison, let's not make this about something it's not. This is simply a matter of business. We have to consider the potential risks. And what risks are those? Jay pressed. My shop is thriving. I have strong support from the community. I've done everything right, followed all the rules. What's the real reason you're denying this loan? Thomas's face hardened. I'm going to ask you to leave now, Mr. Harrison. If you continue to insist on making this personal, I will have to call security. Jay stood up, his heart pounding. You don't have to call security. I'm leaving. But this isn't over, Mr. Parker. People deserve to know how you're making your decisions. This isn't just about me. This is about every business owner who walks through that door. Thomas didn't respond. He simply watched as Jay gathered his documents and walked out of the office. Jay kept his head high as he made his way back through the bank, past the receptionist, and out onto the street. The sun was shining, but Jay felt a storm brewing inside him. As he walked away from the bank, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to stay silent. He wasn't going to let Thomas Parker or anyone else deny him or his community the opportunities they deserved. He had work to do, and it was time to get started. Jay Harrison strode back to his coffee shop, anger simmering inside him. His conversation with Thomas Parker replayed in his mind, each vague excuse and veiled insult stoking his frustration. He swore to himself that this wasn't the last time he would see Thomas, and that he would teach him a lesson. By the time he reached the shop, Jay was ready to explode. He pushed open the door, causing the bell above it to jingle sharply, catching the attention of his customers. Jay forced a smile and nodded to a few regulars before heading straight to the back, where his friends Aisha and Carlos were sitting, a serious expression on both their faces. Jay, how'd the meeting go? Aisha asked, looking up from her phone. She could see the tension in Jay's shoulders, the way he clenched his jaw. Jay tossed his briefcase onto a chair and took a deep breath. Not good. That guy, Thomas Parker, wouldn't even consider my loan. He kept talking about risks and demographics, but he wouldn't give me a straight answer. It was clear what he meant, though. Carlos frowned, leaning back in his chair. Demographics, huh? Sounds like code for something else. What did he actually say? Jay shook his head, pacing the small office. He wouldn't come right out and say it, but it was all in his tone. He implied that my shop and the people it serves don't fit their idea of a safe investment. Even though I've got the numbers to back up my plan, even though my credit is spotless, it wasn't enough for him. He treated me like I was some kind of charity case, like I was asking for a handout. Isha folded her arms across her chest, her expression darkening. Sounds like straight-up discrimination. It's not about your business. It's about who you are and who you serve. This isn't the first time we've heard about something like this happening. They're shutting the door on us, Jay, and it's time we do something about it. Jay stopped pacing and looked at her. But what? I mean, I confronted him, and he threatened to call security. What's the next step? We can't just let this go, but I don't know where to start. Carlos leaned forward, his voice steady. We start by making some noise. We can't let these kinds of practices continue in silence. People need to know what's happening. We need to bring this to the attention of the community. If we all speak out together, they'll have to listen. The bank won't be able to sweep this under the rug if enough of us make a stand. Jay nodded slowly, thinking, you're right. We need to get people together, share our stories, and show that this isn't just about one person. This is about all of us. It's about making sure everyone has a fair shot, no matter where they come from or what they look like. Aisha stood up, determination in her eyes. Let's call a meeting. We'll get other business owners involved, community leaders, anyone who's faced this kind of discrimination. We'll gather here at the shop and figure out a plan. We can't let one bank's biased policies stop us from building the future we want for our community. Jay felt a surge of energy, his earlier frustration transforming into resolve. All right, let's do it. I'll start making calls, and we can spread the word. We'll gather as many people as we can. If the banks won't support us, we'll find another way. Carlos clapped Jay on the shoulder. That's the spirit, Jay. You've got the whole community behind you. We'll make them see that we're stronger together. Jay spent the next few hours calling friends, local business owners, and community leaders. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Many had experienced similar treatment at the hands of the bank or other financial institutions. The word spread quickly, and by the end of the day, Jay had more than a dozen confirmations from people ready to attend the meeting. Later that evening, after the shop had closed, Jay sat at one of the tables, his thoughts still buzzing with the events of the day. Aisha joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Here, you look like you could use this," she said, setting one down in front of him. Jay took a sip, the warmth helping to calm his nerves. "Thanks, Aisha. I can't believe how many people said yes to the meeting. I thought maybe a few would show up, but it sounds like we're going to have a full house." Aisha nodded, smiling. "People are tired of being treated like second-class citizens, Jay. They're ready for change, and you're giving them a chance to make that happen. This is just the beginning." Jay looked around his shop, picturing the faces of his regular customers, the families, the students, the workers who came in every day. He thought about the opportunities his expansion could bring, not just for him, but for all of them. The injustice he'd faced at the bank wasn't just about him. It was about denying the whole community the chance to grow and thrive. "You know," Jay said quietly, "I've always believed in this community. That's why I started this shop in the first place. I wanted to create a space where people felt welcome, where they could come together. And I'm not going to let some banker's prejudice take that away from us." Aisha reached over and squeezed his hand. "We won't let that happen, Jay. We'll fight this together. Tomorrow's meeting is just the start. We're going to show them that we're not going to back down." Jay nodded, feeling a sense of solidarity. "Yeah, we will. We're going to stand up and make sure our voices are heard. They can't ignore us forever." As they sat there, the shop empty and quiet around them, Jay felt a flicker of hope. The bank had tried to shut him out, but instead, they had sparked something bigger. He wasn't alone in this fight, and he knew that together they could create the change they needed. Tomorrow they would begin to write a new chapter for their community, one that didn't rely on the approval of those who refused to see their worth. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Jay arrived at his coffee shop. He unlocked the door, flicked on the lights, and inhaled deeply, feeling the familiar comfort of the shop's aroma. But today, there was a different kind of energy in the air. Today, his coffee shop wasn't just a place for morning routines and casual conversations. It was about to become the starting point for something much bigger. By mid-morning, the shop was filled with people. Every table was occupied, and a few customers even stood, leaning against walls, cups of coffee in hand. The regular morning crowd mingled with new faces. Other business owners from the community, a couple of local activists, and a few curious residents who had heard about the meeting and wanted to show their support. Jay stood at the front of the shop, next to a small table he had set up with a pot of coffee and stacks of paper for taking notes. Aisha was beside him, talking animatedly with Carlos, who was nodding in agreement. The noise level in the shop was higher than usual, a blend of chatter and excitement. Jay looked around, taking in the diverse faces of his community, people of all ages and backgrounds. He felt a wave of gratitude for their support. Aisha turned to Jay, catching his eye. "Ready to get started?" she asked. Jay nodded, taking a deep breath. He stepped forward, raising his hands to get everyone's attention. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know you're all busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I called this meeting because something happened yesterday that I think we need to talk about. It's something that affects all of us." The room quieted and all eyes turned to Jay. He took another breath, steadying himself. "I went to the bank yesterday to apply for a loan to expand my coffee shop. I had everything in order. Good credit, a solid business P, and strong community support. But when I sat down with the loan officer, Thomas Parker, it became clear that the real issue wasn't my qualifications. It was who I am and who my customers are. He made it clear, without saying it outright, that he didn't want to support a business serving our community." Murmurs of agreement and frustration rippled through the crowd. Jay saw heads nodding, faces showing expressions of recognition and anger. He continued, "I know I'm not the only one who's faced this. I've heard stories from many of you about the difficulties of getting loans, the hoops we have to jump through, and the dismissive attitudes we encounter. It's not right, and it's not fair. We've worked hard to build our businesses and serve our community, and we deserve the same opportunities as anyone else." Carlos stepped forward, his voice loud and clear. "Jay's right. We've all been there, facing the same dismissive attitudes and unfair treatment. I've run my grocery store for over 20 years, and I've seen it too. It's not just about one person, it's a systemic problem. They think they can get away with because they don't think we'll fight back." Aisha nodded in agreement. "That's why we're here today. We need to come together and find a way to change this. If the banks won't support us, then we'll find another way. We have the power to make a difference, but we have to do it together." One of the business owners, a middle-aged woman named Gloria who ran a clothing boutique, raised her hand. "What can we do?" she asked. "It feels like they hold all the cards. We can complain, but will it really change anything?" Jay nodded, understanding her concern. "It's true they have power, but so do we. If we come together, we can create our own solutions. Aisha and I have been talking, and we think it's time to start our own credit union, one that's focused on supporting our community and giving everyone a fair chance. It won't be easy, but with enough support, we can make it happen." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd, this time more hopeful than frustrated. Carlos added, "We've got the people and the resources to do this. It's not just about money. It's about building something that reflects our values, a credit union that serves us, understands us, and invests in our future." Aisha stepped forward, her voice passionate. "This is about more than just getting a loan. It's about equality and fairness. It's about taking control of our future and not letting others decide what we can or cannot do. If we build this credit union, we're showing that we believe in ourselves and in each other. And that's powerful." Another business owner, Mark, who ran a local print shop, raised his hand. "I'm in," he said. "I've been looking for a way to expand too, but the bank shut me down the same way they did you, Jay. If there's a chance we can make this credit union work, count me in." More voices echoed Mark's sentiment. Gloria nodded. "I'll support this too. We all know how hard it is to get by sometimes. If we can help each other out, then that's what we should do." Jay felt a swell of pride as he listened to his neighbors and friends. He raised his hands again for attention. "Thank you, everyone. This is just the beginning. We'll need to organize, set up meetings, figure out logistics, and gather the resources we need. But if we stick together, I know we can do it. We'll show the banks that we don't need their approval to succeed." The room broke into applause, and Jay felt a warmth spread through him. This was why he had opened his coffee shop in the first place. Not just to make a living, but to build something that brought people together, that made a difference. As the meeting broke up into smaller groups, people discussing ideas and next steps, Aisha turned to Jay, a smile on her face. "You did it, Jay. You got everyone on board." Jay nodded, still feeling the buzz of the meeting's energy. "We did it, Aisha. This is just the start, but it feels good to see everyone ready to stand together. We're going to make this credit union happen, and we're going to make a difference." Carlos joined them, his face beaming. "This is what community looks like. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but with everyone pulling in the same direction, we're unstoppable." Jay smiled, feeling a sense of purpose and determination. "Let's get to work then. We've got a credit union to build and a community to uplift. We're going to show them what we're made of." As they started organizing the next steps, Jay felt a new sense of hope. The challenges they faced were real, but so was the strength of their community. They weren't alone in this fight, and together they would create the future they deserved. Jay Harrison had never felt busier in his life. From dawn until well after dusk, his days were packed with meetings, phone calls, and planning sessions. The buzz of his coffee shop was now amplified by the steady stream of community members coming in to discuss the new credit union. Tables once filled with customers casually sipping coffee were now covered in charts, flyers, and notes. It was organized chaos, but it was progress. One morning, Jay stood at the counter, pouring coffee into a row of cups. Aisha was beside him, talking on the phone, trying to secure a space for their next community meeting. Carlos was at a table with a group of local business owners, deep in discussion about fundraising ideas. Jay couldn't help but smile. His shop had become the headquarters for their movement. "Jay, we've got a problem," Aisha said, hanging up the phone. She had a frown on her face. "The community center we've been using is booked for the next 2 weeks. We need a space for our big meeting on Saturday. Any ideas?" Jay thought for a moment, wiping his hands on a towel. "What about the church hall on Oak Street? I know Pastor Williams has always been supportive of community initiatives. Maybe he'd let us use the space for a day." Aisha nodded, already dialing the number. "I'll give him a call. Hopefully he's free. We can't afford to lose momentum now. We've got too many people interested." As Aisha talked on the phone, Jay looked around the shop. He caught snippets of conversations. Carlos discussing membership fees, Gloria brainstorming promotional ideas, Mark talking about setting up a website. It was amazing how quickly things were moving. Just a week ago, they were a small group of frustrated business owners, and now they were on the verge of creating something that could change their community for the better. A few minutes later, Aisha hung up the phone, a grin on her face. "Pastor Williams said yes. We can use the church hall for our meeting. I'll send out an announcement and make sure everyone knows the location." Jay nodded, relieved. "Great. Let's make sure we're prepared. We need to outline the credit union's mission, its benefits, and how people can get involved. We also need to finalize our leadership structure and assign specific roles. We can't do this alone. We need everyone to pitch in. Agreed, Aisha said. I've already talked to some of the folks from the meeting last week. They're ready to take on responsibilities. We'll have a solid team in place by the end of the day. Carlos walked over holding a stack of papers. We've got some good ideas for fundraising, he said, handing the papers to Jay. Local businesses are willing to donate a percentage of their sales for a week to help get us started. Also, some of the community members suggested a crowdfunding campaign. We could raise awareness and funds at the same time. Jay scanned the papers, nodding. These are great ideas. The more people we involve, the stronger our foundation will be. We should also reach out to local media. If we get some coverage, it'll help spread the word faster. Carlos smiled. Already on it. I know a reporter at the local paper. I'll set up a meeting. This credit union is going to be the talk of the town. As the day went on, Jay and his team worked tirelessly. They divided tasks, each person taking on a specific role. Aisha focused on organizing meetings and managing communications. Carlos handled fundraising and outreach to local businesses. Jay took charge of drafting the credit union's charter and ensuring they met all legal requirements. They were a well-oiled machine, each playing to their strengths, and the credit union was starting to take shape. Later that afternoon, Jay sat down with Mark to discuss the website. They needed a platform where people could get information, sign up for memberships, and learn about upcoming events. Mark sketched out a few ideas on a notepad. We'll keep it simple, Mark said. A homepage with our mission statement, a page for news and updates, and a membership sign-up form. I can have a draft version up by the end of the week. Once we start fundraising, we can add a donation page too. Jay nodded, impressed. That sounds perfect. The website will be key in reaching people who can't make it to the meetings. It'll give us a way to stay connected with everyone and keep them informed. Exactly, Mark agreed. And once we're up and running, we can use it to promote community events, share financial education resources, and more. It'll be more than just a site. It'll be a hub for everything we're doing. As the day came to a close, Jay felt a sense of accomplishment. They had made significant progress, and the credit union was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a reality. He gathered everyone together for a quick meeting before they headed home. Thank you all for your hard work, Jay said, looking around at the tired but determined faces. We've done a lot in a short amount of time, and we're on the right track. Let's keep this momentum going. Remember, we're not just building a credit union. We're building a future for our community. Every step we take brings us closer to that goal. Aisha raised her cup of coffee. To the future, she said, smiling. To the future, everyone echoed, raising their cups. Jay watched as his friends and neighbors gathered their things and headed out the door. He felt a sense of pride and gratitude. They were all in this together, and their collective effort was creating something powerful. As the shop emptied and the noise faded, Jay sat down at a table with his laptop. He pulled up his notes, going over the next steps. There was still so much to do, but he was ready. They were building something that mattered, something that would stand up against the injustices they faced. The credit union was more than just a financial institution. It was a statement of their resilience and strength. Jay looked around his coffee shop, now quiet and still, and he knew that this was only the beginning. They had the will and the determination, and soon they would have the means. Together, they were changing their future one step at a time. The morning of the credit union's grand opening was a blend of excitement and nervous energy. Jay Harrison stood outside the small office space they had managed to rent, feeling the cool morning breeze on his face. It was a modest building, nothing fancy, but it had a welcoming feel. The newly painted sign above the door read, Community First Credit Union, and Jay couldn't help but smile every time he looked at it. Aisha and Carlos were inside, setting up chairs and making sure everything was in place. Jay took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and walked through the door. The space was buzzing with activity. Volunteers were setting up a table with coffee and pastries, and Mark was busy arranging flyers and information packets about the credit union's services. Gloria was greeting the early arrivals, her smile bright and inviting. Jay, everything's looking great, Aisha called out from the back of the room. We've got a good turnout already, and it's not even time to start. Jay nodded, scanning the room. People from all over the community were filing in, filling the chairs and standing in small groups, chatting excitedly. He recognized many of them, regulars from his coffee shop, local business owners, community leaders. There were also new faces, people who had heard about the credit union through word of mouth or the articles in the local paper. Carlos walked over holding a clipboard. Jay, we've got a solid agenda for today. A few speeches to start us off, then a rundown of our services and how people can sign up. We'll finish with a Q&A session. I've got a list of questions people submitted ahead of time. Jay nodded. Sounds perfect. Let's make sure we emphasize that this credit union is for everyone. It's about building something that serves the community and puts people first. As more people filled the room, Jay felt the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just a business opening. It was a symbol of their collective effort, a testament to their determination to create something better for their community. He glanced at Aisha, who gave him an encouraging nod. Jay stepped up to the small podium they had set up at the front of the room. The chatter quieted as everyone turned to face him. He took a deep breath and began. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. This is a moment we've been working toward for a long time. When we first started talking about creating our own credit union, it was just an idea. We knew we wanted something better for our community, but we weren't sure how to make it happen. But look around. Today, we've made that idea a reality. Community First Credit Union is here, and it's here because of each and every one of you. A round of applause filled the room, and Jay smiled, feeling the energy from the crowd. He continued, this credit union isn't just another financial institution. It's a place where everyone is welcome, where your voice matters, and where we work together to build a stronger future. Whether you're a business owner, a student, a parent, or a retiree, this is your credit union. We're here to support each other, to invest in our community, and to make sure everyone has access to the financial services they need. Aisha stepped forward to speak next. We started Community First because we believe in the power of community. We believe that when we come together, we can create opportunities, uplift each other, and make real change. This credit union is a testament to that belief. It's about fairness, equality, and giving everyone a chance to succeed. She went on to explain the various services they would offer: low-interest loans for small businesses, savings accounts with no minimum balance, financial education workshops. As Aisha spoke, Jay saw nods of approval from the crowd. People were leaning in, listening closely, their faces showing expressions of hope and determination. Carlos took the podium next, talking about the practical steps people could take to become members. He explained the membership process, the benefits, and the ways they could get involved. He emphasized that Community First was more than just a place to manage money. It was a hub for community action, a resource for those who needed support. After the speeches, Jay opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up, and Jay called on a young man in the front row. How do we know this credit union will be different from the banks? The young man asked. They promise to help us, but they only care about their profits. How can we trust that this place won't be the same? Jay nodded, understanding the concern. That's a good question. The difference is that this credit union is owned by its members, by you. Every member has a say in how we operate. We're not here to make a profit for shareholders. We're here to serve the community. Our goal is to reinvest in our neighborhood, to provide fair and accessible services, and to support the financial health of everyone who joins. Another question came from an older woman in the back. What about financial education? A lot of us don't know much about loans or credit scores. Will you offer help with that? Aisha answered, her voice warm and reassuring. Absolutely. We'll be hosting workshops and one-on-one sessions to help our members understand their finances. We believe that education is key to empowerment, and we want to make sure everyone has the tools they need to succeed. As more questions were asked and answered, Jay felt a growing sense of optimism. The community was engaged, eager to learn and ready to participate. This wasn't just a credit union opening, it was a turning point. People were coming together to take control of their financial futures. The Q&A session wrapped up, and Jay thanked everyone for their time and support. The room broke into applause again, and Jay felt a wave of pride. They had done it. The credit union was officially open, and the community was ready to embrace it. As people mingled, Jay made his way around the room, shaking hands and chatting with attendees. He saw old friends and met new ones, each conversation reinforcing the importance of what they had built. Carlos was speaking with a small group of business owners about applying for loans, while Aisha was surrounded by young people eager to learn about savings accounts. Gloria came up to Jay, a smile on her face. This is amazing, Jay. Look at all these people. They're excited, hopeful. You've given them something to believe in. Jay smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude. We've done this together, Gloria. Every one of us has played a part. This is just the beginning, but it's a strong start. I know there will be challenges ahead, but seeing all these people here today, I know we can handle whatever comes our way. Mark joined them holding a camera. I've been taking pictures all morning. We'll put them up on the website, show everyone what we're doing. This is a day to remember. Jay nodded. Absolutely. This is a milestone for our community. We're showing that we don't need to rely on the old systems that tried to shut us out. We can build our own, something that reflects our values and our commitment to each other. As the grand opening event continued, Jay looked around the room, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Community First Credit Union was more than just a place to bank. It was a symbol of their collective strength, a beacon of hope for what they could achieve together. The sun shone through the windows, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Jay knew they had a long road ahead, but with each step they took, they were paving the way for a brighter, more inclusive future. Today was proof that when people came together with a common goal, they could achieve the extraordinary. And this was only the beginning. The success of Community First Credit Union spread quickly through the neighborhood. Word-of-mouth buzz, fueled by the grand opening event and the pictures Mark posted online, drew more people every day. Members opened accounts, businesses applied for loans, and residents signed up for financial education workshops. It wasn't long before the story caught the attention of local media. A small article in the community section of the local newspaper highlighted the credit union's mission, emphasizing its role in supporting the underserved. Jay Harrison stood behind the counter of his coffee shop, watching as a group of customers huddled over a copy of the newspaper, their voices low but excited. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The credit union was making a difference just as they had hoped, but Jay also knew that their success was bound to cause ripples beyond their community. A few blocks away in the sleek and towering building of Citibank, Thomas Parker sat in his office, flipping through the latest financial reports. His face was tight with frustration. The numbers were down, and he didn't need a detailed analysis to know why. He had seen the news about Community First Credit Union. At first, he had dismissed it as a small-time operation that wouldn't last. But the credit union was growing, and its success was starting to eat into Citibank's profits. Customers were leaving, preferring the community-driven ethos of the credit union over the impersonal, corporate approach of Citibank. Thomas tapped his fingers on his desk, his mind racing. He knew the credit union's popularity wasn't just a fad. It was tapping into a real need, one that his bank had ignored for too long. The board of directors was already questioning the drop in numbers, and it wouldn't be long before they started pointing fingers. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Thomas looked up to see Susan, one of his colleagues, standing in the doorway. Her expression was serious. "Thomas, the board wants to see you," Susan said. "Now." Thomas frowned but nodded. He stood, straightening his tie and gathering his composure. He knew this meeting was coming. The board wouldn't ignore a trend like this without demanding answers. Thomas followed Susan to the boardroom, a large, glass-walled space with a polished table that could seat a dozen. Today, only 5 members of the board were present, sitting in a semicircle at the far end of the table. Their expressions ranged from concern to irritation. "Thomas, have a seat," said Mr. Collins, the board's chairman, gesturing to the chair across from them. Thomas sat down, forcing a confident smile. He needed to control the narrative. "We've been reviewing the recent performance metrics," Mr. Collins began, not wasting time with pleasantries. "There's been a noticeable decline in loan applications and new accounts, particularly in the branches under your management. Can you explain why?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, I'm aware of the numbers. The decline is due to a new credit union that opened up nearby. They've been attracting customers with lower fees and community-focused messaging. It's a temporary shift, driven more by novelty than by sustainable business practices." Another board member, Mrs. Patel, leaned forward. "Temporary? Thomas, this so-called temporary shift has resulted in a significant drop in our customer base. We've had complaints from clients about the service they've received here compared to what they're getting at this credit union. How do you propose we address this?" Thomas kept his voice steady. "With all due respect, the credit union is catering to a specific demographic, one that has traditionally not been our target market. Their focus on community is commendable, but it doesn't align with our business model. Our goal has always been to maintain a high standard of service and financial security." Mr. Collins exchanged a glance with Mrs. Patel. "Thomas, we've also reviewed some of the complaints and the approval history for loans in your branch. There appears to be a pattern of bias in your decision-making. Several loan applications from minority-owned businesses have been denied, despite meeting the basic requirements. Meanwhile, less qualified applicants from other demographics have been approved. Can you explain this?" Thomas felt his face flush. He hadn't expected the conversation to turn in this direction. "I assure you, our loan approval process is based on objective criteria. We consider credit history, financial stability, and risk management. If there's any perception of bias, it's unfounded." "Is it?" Mrs. Patel asked, her tone sharp. Because the community is talking, Thomas. They're saying that Citibank doesn't support minority-owned businesses, that we're out of touch with the needs of the people we serve. We can't afford this kind of reputation, especially when our competitors are gaining ground. Mr. Collins added, the board has decided to conduct an internal review of the loan approval process in your branch. We need to ensure that our practices are fair, transparent, and in line with our values. If the review finds evidence of discrimination, there will be serious consequences. Thomas's confidence wavered. With all due respect, Mr. Collins, we have policies in place to prevent discrimination. Any discrepancies are purely coincidental. I believe this review will show that our practices are sound. Mr. Collins leaned forward, his expression hardening. I hope you're right, Thomas. But let me be clear. Citibank cannot afford to ignore the voices of our community. If we find that our practices have been unfairly excluding anyone, changes will be made, and those responsible will be held accountable. Thomas nodded, keeping his face neutral. Understood, Mr. Collins. I will cooperate fully with the review. The meeting concluded, and Thomas left the boardroom, tension knotting his stomach. He knew his job was on the line. As he walked back to his office, he couldn't help but feel a surge of resentment toward Jay Harrison and his credit union. They had disrupted the status quo, and now he was paying the price. Meanwhile, back at Community First Credit Union, Jay and his team were unaware of the turmoil at Citibank. They were focused on serving their members, helping people with loan applications, answering questions, and providing financial guidance. The office was bustling with activity, a steady flow of community members coming in to open accounts or attend workshops. Aisha was in the middle of a workshop on budgeting when Jay stepped into the main office area. He saw Carlos talking to a group of business owners about small business loans. Jay's heart swelled with pride. This was exactly what they had envisioned, a place where people felt welcome, supported, and empowered. Jay's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from Mark. Mark, have you seen the news? Citibank is under investigation for discriminatory practices. Looks like we're making an impact. Jay felt a flicker of surprise, followed by satisfaction. The change they were fighting for was happening, and it was bigger than he had imagined. Their efforts had shed light on the inequalities that had gone unnoticed for too long. Now, even the bigger institutions were being forced to confront their own flaws. He looked around the credit union office at the people working and the members being served, and he knew they were on the right path. The community had come together to build something better, something fairer. And while there was still a long way to go, they were making progress one step at a time. Back at Citibank, Thomas Parker sat in his office, the weight of the impending review pressing down on him. The success of Community First Credit Union had not only challenged his way of doing business, but had also exposed the flaws in the system he had taken for granted. Whether he liked it or not, change was coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Jay Harrison knew the fight wasn't over, but today there was a victory to celebrate. They had stood up for their rights, and their voices had been heard. Community First Credit Union was more than a financial institution. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of community to effect change. Jay Harrison walked through the door of his coffee shop early in the morning, just as the first light of dawn was beginning to filter through the windows. He flicked on the lights and took in the familiar sights and smells, the scent of freshly ground coffee beans, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the warm glow of the wooden tables. Today felt different, though. It felt lighter, more hopeful. The events of the past few weeks had changed everything, not just for Jay, but for the entire community. Jay spent a few minutes setting up the shop, turning on the espresso machine, and arranging the pastries in the display case. The routine was comforting, a reminder of the steady foundation that had always been his coffee shop. But today his thoughts were already at the credit union, which had become a second home, a place where his dreams and reality had finally met. The door jingled as Aisha walked in, carrying a stack of flyers. She wore a wide smile, her eyes bright with excitement. Morning, Jay. I brought more flyers for the credit union. We're getting new members every day, and people are signing up for the workshops like crazy. Jay smiled back, wiping his hands on a towel. That's great news, Aisha. It's amazing how quickly everything is growing. I still can't believe how far we've come in such a short time. Aisha set the flyers on a table and grabbed a coffee cup. Believe it, Jay, we're making a real difference. People feel it. They're finally getting the support they've been looking for, and it's because of what we've built together. As they talked, Carlos walked in, carrying a newspaper under his arm. Good morning, team, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. He laid the newspaper on the table, spreading it out for Jay and Aisha to see. The headline read, Citibank fires loan officer amid discrimination investigation. Jay's eyes widened as he read the article. So, Thomas Parker is finally out, he said. I guess they couldn't ignore the community's voice after all. This is a big deal. Carlos nodded. This is just the beginning, Jay. We've shown that standing up for what's right can lead to real change. People are starting to notice. Not just here, but in other neighborhoods too. We've had calls from community leaders in different parts of the city asking how they can start their own credit unions. Aisha grinned. It's like a ripple effect. One small action leading to bigger and bigger waves. We're not just helping our community. We're inspiring others to take control of their futures too. Jay felt a surge of pride. This was what he had dreamed of, creating something that would have a lasting impact, not just on his neighborhood, but beyond. He thought back to that first meeting in his coffee shop, when it was just a handful of people with a shared frustration and a hope for something better. Now they were leading a movement. Jay poured coffee for everyone, and they sat together, talking about the future. They discussed plans for expanding the credit union services, adding more workshops on financial literacy, and finding ways to support local entrepreneurs. The ideas flowed easily, each one building on the last. They were all energized by the possibilities. Aisha leaned back in her chair, sipping her coffee. You know, we should celebrate. Not just the success of the credit union, but everything we've accomplished together. We've faced a lot of challenges, but we've come out stronger because of it. How about a community event? Something that brings everyone together, celebrates our diversity, and showcases what we built? Carlos nodded enthusiastically. A festival, maybe? We could have food from different cultures, music, and performances. It would be a great way to bring people together and show off what the credit union is all about. We could set up a booth for new memberships, answer questions, and get more people involved. Jay's eyes lit up. That's a fantastic idea. A celebration would be the perfect way to bring the community together and keep the momentum going. We could use the park down the street, make it an all-day event. I'm sure we can get local vendors and artists to participate. Aisha was already jotting down ideas. We'll need a planning committee, volunteers, and some sponsorships. But I know we can make it happen. This will be the event of the year. They spent the next hour brainstorming and planning, each idea more exciting than the last. Jay felt the energy in the room, the shared sense of purpose and community. This was why they had started the credit union, to build something that brought people together, to create opportunities, and to foster a sense of belonging. As the morning wore on, more customers came into the coffee shop, filling the tables and adding to the lively atmosphere. Some stopped to chat with Jay, congratulating him on the success of the credit union. Others picked up flyers, eager to learn more about the upcoming festival. Jay watched as a young mother signed up for a savings account, her toddler tugging at her hand. An older man asked about the small business loans, his face lighting up as Carlos explained the options. A group of teenagers listened intently to Aisha as she talked about the financial literacy workshops. Everywhere Jay looked, he saw the impact they were making. By midday, the coffee shop was buzzing with excitement. The plans for the festival were taking shape, and Jay could already imagine the park filled with people, music playing, and the smell of food in the air. It would be a celebration of everything they had achieved and a reminder of the power of community. Carlos glanced at his watch. I need to head over to the credit union. We've got a meeting with a few new members who want to volunteer for the festival. This is going to be bigger than we thought. Jay nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment. Go ahead, Carlos. I'll hold down the fort here. Aisha and I will keep working on the details. Let's make this festival something to remember. Carlos left and Aisha stayed behind, helping Jay with the afternoon rush. As they served customers and answered questions, Jay couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't been easy. They had faced resistance, doubt, and challenges, but they had pushed through together, and now they were seeing the fruits of their labor. By late afternoon, the shop began to quiet down. Jay and Aisha sat at a table, catching their breath. You know, Jay said, looking around the shop, when I started this place, I just wanted to create a welcoming spot for the community. I never imagined it would lead to all of this. Aisha smiled. That's the thing about dreams, Jay. They have a way of growing when you least expect it. You've created something special here. The coffee shop was just the beginning. Now we're building a future. Jay nodded, feeling a sense of peace. And we're just getting started. The credit union, the festival, everything we've done, it's all about building a better community. One where everyone has a voice, where everyone has a chance to succeed. As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow through the windows, Jay felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had faced challenges, but they had met them head on. They had built something meaningful, something that would last. And as long as they continued to stand together, There was no limit to what they could achieve. The journey was far from over, but Jay was ready for whatever came next. With his friends by his side and the support of the community behind him, he knew they could handle anything. Together, they were writing a new story for their neighborhood, one filled with hope, resilience, and a vision for a brighter future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, Jay savored the moment, the sense of accomplishment, and the joy of knowing they had made a difference. They were building more than a credit union. They were building a legacy of strength, unity, and the power of community.